Hello, Hugh Grant fans, and welcome to Hugh's News, a Taking Hugh for Granted bonus podcast. Hugh's News aims to keep you right up to date with everything Hugh Grant. From an announcement he's signed on to do a new project, right down to him doing a particularly saucy tweet. If it's big Hugh Grant news, we want you to know about it. The big news today is that Hugh Grant is signed up to do 2 massive upcoming films. I'm Diggory, and to discuss these movies with me, I'm joined by my fellow Horse and Hound correspondent, Oscar Beardmore-Gray. Oscar, how the bloody hell are you doing today, mate?
I'm doing fantastically well, Diggory, and I just want to start off by saying I think I might like the Hugh's News intro more than the Taking You for Granted one.
It's much shorter, which I also think is quite fun. I think by now, like however 30-odd episodes in, people are like, bloody hell, a minute long to get through this shit about them meeting up at uni and stuff. So maybe we should change it. But how are you doing? You all right? Everything good on your end?
All good, yeah, mate. Just excited that we've got liftoff of more Hugh Grant news. I mean, we didn't expect this, did we? But as soon as the New Year's rolled in, it's like Hugh's decided to get off his backside and go off and make new stuff.
Exactly. I think I put on the Best of 2020 episode, I was like, I don't think he's going to do anything else really next year. I think he's going to be quite quiet. The next thing he did was Death to 2020. So something came out like 3 days after I said that. And now he's signed up to do 2 more things. He's filming. We should just get right into it. He's currently filming in Turkey, a film that was originally reported as being called Five Eyes, but we're not so sure about that now because the film's director, Guy Ritchie, put up a little video on Insta just yesterday, actually, with them wrapping shooting, and he used the hashtag untitled Guy Ritchie film. So who knows? We'll call it Five Eyes for now because it's easier, but there's 2 different plots that are circling around the internet of this film. I'll read them both to you and you can see what you think. An agent is recruited by a global intelligence alliance to track down and stop the sale of a deadly weapons technology that threatens to disrupt the world order. So that's number 1. Number 2, very similar but slightly different. An MI6 operative and CIA agent are recruited by the Five Eyes network to prevent the sale of a deadly weapon technology.
Well, my initial thought is that both of those plots sound very similar to The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Exactly.
Which, of course, Hugh Grant has starred in 2 Guy Ritchie films before, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Gentleman. And that The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was based on this story about a collaboration between MI6, the Russian intelligence, and the CIA. So that sounds like it's very similar. I mean, are we looking at a sequel, or is this a standalone?
Well, this is what's bizarre, because if it was a sequel, you'd expect to see
Armie Hammer,
of course. Although I don't think we'll be seeing him in anything. Maybe for a while.
No.
But, well, who knows?
Forced retirement for Armie, maybe.
Indeed, at least for the moment. And, of course, Henry Cavill. But neither of them are signed up to this film. Maybe this is a good time to look at the cast. So Jason Statham, who has done a load of films with Guy Ritchie before, I think this would be his 5th, will play Orson Fortune. What a name.
That is a name.
And that's all we've got on that. Aubrey Plaza, who I love, she's very, very funny, will be in the film. A guy called Carrie Elwes will play Nathan Jasmine. He's in Saw, Robin Hood, Men in Tights, great film. And he's the mayor in Stranger Things. So we only have those 2 names to go off. I'm thinking, though, Jason Statham will be the MI6 agent. Aubrey Plaza or Carrie will be the CIA agent that he has to work with. That's what I'm thinking.
And where does Hugh fit in?
Well, Oscar, I'm glad you asked that, because the other day, Hugh Grant actually did an interview with Mark Maron on the WTF podcast and gave us a little insight into his character. Mark asked him...
What is the movie, man? Can you say?
Yeah, it's another Guy Ritchie film. I've made 2 already. This is another one. Stars Jason Statham. It's like a spy thing.
Yeah.
And I'm a billionaire.
Yeah.
Arms dealer who talks like that.
A billionaire arms dealer that talks like that. Which accent is that? Would you call it? Where's that?
Well, it's sort of North London. So a lot of the time you say, no, Mark, shush, I'm talking. Shush.
Well, I mean, I guess I have 2 initial thoughts about that. There's the 2 things in my brain are kind of positive and negative. The negative, I guess, is that if it is just a film that's quite similar to The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I'm not sure quite what's new here for Hugh, and I'm a little bit worried that he might be treading on similar ground. And yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant to get behind this film if it's going to be very similar to The Gentleman and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Having said that, Hugh Grant starring along Jason Statham is something I am intrigued about, and I'm looking forward to seeing. I mean, Jason Statham couldn't be further from Hugh Grant, really. You know, for those of you who don't know him, he basically is he just goes around beating people up on screen, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, a British hard man who just goes around and whacks people in every film.
I think he's got like a black belt in like 5 different martial arts or something.
Oh, really? Does it?
He was a professional diver for a little bit, which is really rogue.
Yeah, that's wicked. Well, so it's going to be an interesting film in that case. I think one thing that made me feel a bit better, because I think I agree. I think The Man from U.N.C.L.E., whilst it was, an enjoyable film, Hugh Grant is a delightful cameo in it, kind of. That's the best you can really say for him. He's a delightful cameo. He doesn't really have too much of it. But in The Gentleman, Hugh Grant was not only incredible and brilliant and like what a wonderful, fruity character, but also he was a big player in the story. And what is good about this film is Hugh said he was an arms dealer. And obviously we know the antagonists in this film are going to be selling deadly weapons. So hopefully he plays a big part in that. Obviously the voice as well, very similar to Fletcher in The Gentleman. So hopefully a fun, fruity character again there. And thirdly, the writers, Ivan Atkinson and Marn Davis. They both wrote The Gentleman and a film called Wrath of Man, which is apparently already completed in another Guy Ritchie film that comes out this year, I would imagine. So they wrote The Gentleman and this film. So the fact that they wrote that makes me hope that maybe this film is more in line with The Gentleman rather than The Man from U.N.C.L.E.,
Yeah.
Because The Man from U.N.C.L.E., whilst it was enjoyable, I think for me, The Gentleman had a lot more about it and was a lot more enjoyable. That was just me personally.
Well, I mean, I rated Man from U.N.C.L.E. in my top 10 Hugh Grant films, so
that is true.
We have a differencing of opinion there. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, Guy Ritchie must really love Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
And Hugh Grant must enjoy working with him too. It is interesting when Hugh goes on, I mean, lots of actors are like this, where they find a relationship with a certain director and they go for it. They star in multiple films, and Hugh is no different with the likes of Richard Curtis, etc. So it will be interesting to see where this one goes. I'm just I think I can't get over this fact that I would have liked to have seen something maybe a bit different, but we shouldn't judge a book by its cover before we've even read the first page. So
that's very true. And we shouldn't look a gift horse in the face or the mouth. What is it?
I don't know. But you're right.
We should accept it. This is more Hugh Grant. Fantastic.
But Diggs, talking about sort of new projects and new things that Hugh's doing and new adventures in his career, this other film that he signed up to do is exactly that, it seems.
Adventure is the operative word there. Dungeons and Dragons. So the Dungeons and Dragons IP, everyone know that as the popular tabletop role-playing game that nerds play. It's that and World of Warcraft that is sort of like the big nerd things. And obviously, I've played both, and I love both of them.
I've played neither, so there we go.
Well, I'm a newcomer to Dungeons and Dragons, but yeah, it's an interesting game, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they tackle this, because there's going to be some money behind it. There's an expectation that comes with it, because it's funny, like every day I look up Hugh Grant in the news, obviously. And when this was announced, you had your usual thing with, NME saying, Hugh Grant signed up to be in Dungeons and Dragons, new Dungeons and Dragons film, blah, blah. But then you also had all of these, like, how do I put this nicely? Geeks doing YouTube videos where they were like, Hugh Grant signed up to do Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm absolutely furious. He's gonna ruin the franchise. And also lots of friendly nerds doing similar things, but saying Hugh Grant, this is brilliant and it's going to be really nice, and Dungeons and Dragons is hitting the mainstream. So it's very exciting, but yeah, it's sort of split opinion.
Well, I think that's a really interesting thing, because I mean I don't know the Dungeons and Dragons community very well, but what I do know is that it's an extremely active and like kind of culty kind of community where you have a lot of very, very hardcore players and fans. So I'm sure that they really care about how the franchise is going to be portrayed on screen. And I'm imagining that a lot of them didn't imagine Hugh Grant as the man who might bring that adventure to life. So that in itself is quite interesting.
Indeed. I mean, and let's talk more about Hugh Grant's role in the film. He will be playing, allegedly, according to Vulture, he will be playing a villain called Forge Fletcher. Fletcher! Interesting. He has played a Fletcher before. Obviously, in The Gentleman, he played Fletcher, and in Music and Lyrics, he was Alex Fletcher. So
the universe is just going round and round.
Exactly. It's crazy. So he'll be playing Forge Fletcher. We only know one other name. Sophia Lillis will be a character named Doric. So there's the only two names we've got of actual characters, but it's almost certain that Hugh will play the villain in this, which that is really fun. And that I am looking forward to because we love him as a villain.
You know what I think got him this part? I think that his role in Paddington 2 was front and center on his CV for this one.
Absolutely.
It's I guess you can kind of imagine something similar to the different characters he dresses up in Paddington 2, whether that's that like knight or the nun, although I'm not sure if there's nuns in Dungeons and Dragons, but that kind of thing.
Could be.
Historic kind of dress up characters with a bit of touch of comedy to it, I imagine is a similar thing that might be brought to this movie.
Well, that's what's interesting, and I think it's a good point you make there. I think probably one of the issues with Dungeons and Dragons is it probably in the past it's probably tried to go down the Lord of the Rings route where it's sort of taken itself quite seriously, I imagine. And because people think, people that like this sort of stuff, they're in it for the lore, they're in it for the dragons, they're in it for the kings, and all that sort of stuff, and the family trees. When which is true, but I think having played Dungeons and Dragons like twice, very recently though, I'm very much enjoying it. Dungeons and Dragons is a game that the whole point of it sort of is like you sort of craft your own adventures. The fun comes from it. Silly things happening, and you roll dice to see what happens. Let's say there's 20-sided die, you roll a 20 very good things, 1 very bad things, and it sort of scales from there. So basically, it's all up to chance. The things in Dungeons and Dragons, yes, it's wizards and elves and stuff, but the fun things that happen it's all leading up to chance. I think maybe, and what is good is the casting of Hugh Grant and the people they've got behind it. So the people that are directing it and writing it, Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly. They wrote Spider-Man Homecoming, Vacation, Horrible Bosses 1 and 2, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2. I think, bit rogue that last one. But they're sort of going down the route where I think they're going to take this a little bit. They're going to take it as it is. This is a game. It's fun. And it might, and hopefully there'll be a funny edge to it as well, where they can sort of bridge that gap. Because films that take themselves too seriously like this, they're a bore.
They are a bore. And I can imagine this being a kind of young kids being able to watch it, but sort of a teeny movie with a touch of comedy that brings in perhaps an adult audience. That's kind of where I'm imagining it going. And I'm just wondering now, it makes me think whether the sort of funny thought that came to me is whether Hugh is sitting there in Turkey on his days off while filming Five Eyes, playing Dungeons and Dragons with his mates online.
Yes, exactly.
Presumably, there's a lot of research that has to go into this, and you have to. Probably the best research is by playing the game.
Absolutely, I could imagine him rolling. What character would he play? He'll be playing. Well, Forge Fletcher sounds like a gnome or a dwarf. Forging. I guess Forge Fletcher. Yeah, forging great weaponry in the I don't know, mountains of Asgard or something.
I'm imagining Hugh Grant playing like either a gnome with like big ears, like looking like Mr. Tumless out of Narnia, or kind of like a Dumbledore character with like a big shaft and a massive beard.
A big shaft. Wowza. We really are. We've got fantasies. Absolutely. There's a massive Venn diagram happening right here. Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Oh, man, I would be so happy with all of those outcomes.
Particularly the big shaft.
Oh, certainly. Let's be real. But I'm very intrigued, and I think the fact that they've gone down the route of who they've got for it and who they've cast for it in terms of the crew as well. Like I say, even the cinematographer has worked on 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street. If the crew have this sort of comedic thing going on, I think this could be a film that actually works if they do it, if they get it just right. I mean, there's parallels with another writer-director duo called Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. Like them, they're known for their more adult comedies. They did 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, but they also did family-friendly hits, such as the Lego Movie. I don't know if you saw that. That was class.
I mean, that was a well-received film.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think the thing that is curious about this and really is getting me excited is that this has the potential to be a proper franchise, I think.
Exactly, yeah.
And Hugh to be the lead face of a big franchise is in his 60s. I mean, that's quite exciting. I'm not saying this is going to get as big as like your Spider-Mans or your or things like that, but certainly things like the Lego Movie, that kind of realm. You can imagine this having sequels and prequels, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, well, like you say, it's interesting you mentioned Spider-Man, that the guys that I was saying who were similar, they did Spider-Man Into the Spideyverse. Again, another great thing. But Goldstein and Francis Daly, who are writing this film and directing it, did Spider-Man Homecoming. And that was them restarting the Spider-Man universe, because obviously it was Tobey Maguire and then it was... Andrew Garfield, and they kickstarted it again with Tom Holland. And I think probably what Dungeons and Dragons have thought is, hey, here's a couple of guys who they have taken a huge franchise in Spider-Man. They've made a film that's done really well, kickstarted that franchise again. Let's try and do it with Dungeons and Dragons. It's an existing, incredibly famous IP. Whether you've played it or not, everyone has heard of Dungeons and Dragons. Whatever they may think of it, whether they think it's for nerds, geeks, whatever. Either way, it's growing in popularity. It's a huge, huge name. And Hugh Grant is going to be a part of it. It's very, very exciting.
And I think also the other thing is that it's got real international clout. It's not just going to be people in England or people in America watching this. This could be a real global hit. And I think it will be interesting to see as the development of this goes on. But I think we're likely to see another big male lead, perhaps a younger person come on board, like a Tom Holland, similar kind of person.
Funny you should say that. They have Chris Pine. He's a leading man, known for Star Trek, the reboot of Star Trek. He was also in the Wonder Woman films. So he is no stranger to big blockbuster films. And with the Star Trek thing, again, another franchise that he kickstarted and was he was Captain Kirk, I think. I don't know. I mean,
aren't you a nerd enough to know this, Diggs?
I do you know what? I should know, because I loved that Star Trek reboot. I remember I watched that first one with Chris Pine in, and I think I cried at the intro, the first 5 minutes, or maybe it's the second one. And I got so into it that I went back and watched some of the old Star Treks, Wrath of Khan, and I was like, so I did get fully into it. So, but as I say, exactly what you're saying, this has the potential to be a big series of films, a proper franchise. And like, you know, the casting shows you they're getting people that have experience of doing that. And the global appeal, I think, is very important. Dungeons and Dragons, very big also in Eastern Asia. It will be very interesting to see. Only a few big exports from Hollywood get to actually enter China. I think they still have rules around how many films they have in from other countries and stuff. They're very, very picky and choosy about what films they let in and allow. I wonder whether this one, like you say, because of the global appeal, because of the appeal in China, it's a huge market for these films, whether they'll pander slightly to that. It'll be very, very interesting to see. And if they do that, then my word, will Hugh Grant get a big pay packet as a result.
This could be a huge payday for him, I have to say. But anyway, it's incredibly exciting. And we got to say, Hugh Grant's officially out of retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many times has he retired? It's hard to keep count. But yeah, he's back and he's in flying form.
I mean, Diggs, do we have a timeline for when any of these films might come out?
Well, obviously, as we know, Five Eyes, aka untitled Guy Ritchie film, that wrapped just the other day. So they've finished filming that. So I would imagine that post-production, etc., reshoots, if there's going to be any, it will be the end of the year, if not the start of next year. So I would wager 2022 for that, especially with Guy Ritchie's other film, Wrath of Man, I think probably coming out this year, because I think that's done and dusted and ready to go. So I would imagine, 2022 for Five Eyes, aka untitled Guy Ritchie film. What I see online is they say that 2022 is when we can expect Dungeons and Dragons. Let's hope so. If that was the case, 2022 is going to be a big year for Hugh Grant.
It is. I mean, there's the exciting news. We know the podcast has got another year left in it in that case.
At the very least. We're not retiring anytime soon.
You can imagine that the Dungeons and Dragons film is going to be a lot of post-production CGI, so maybe the pre-production of that film isn't too heavy.
I started to watch Dungeons and Dragons, the 2000 film, as research for this. Had starred Jeremy Irons. I'll tell you what, just I would implore you, particularly you, Oscar, and everyone listening, just type in Dungeons and Dragons 2000 film online. Just watch the trailer. The CGI is Oh, wow. It's sublime. It is class. And it's annoying because the full film's up on YouTube, but I think it's in Turkish or something, or actually maybe Hindi. It's not often that you get those languages mixed up. But which is a real shame because I'd love to watch that film because, just give us an idea of what we can expect from Dungeons & Dragons. I have a final question for you, Oscar. Which of these two films are you more excited for, do you think?
I'm going to say I'm more excited for the Dungeons and Dragons, and that's someone who's never really got into Dungeons and Dragons. And I have a group of friends out here who play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and I've always I've never got involved. But to be honest, if Hugh's involved in it, I'm sign me up.
Check it out. Exactly. Yeah. It's cool again. It's cool.
It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool after this. 100%.
Absolutely.
I'm just looking forward to Hugh Grant on the Graham Norton sofa explaining Dungeons and Dragons to their 11 o'clock audience.
That's so true. Exactly. And Hugh, let's be honest, Hugh's going to sit and be like, look, guys, I don't get it either. They just said, wear this robe, shake this shaft staff around, and shout some words and cast some spells, and we'll do the rest in post, and
exactly.
And he gets a big pay packet.
How about you, Diggs? What are you looking forward to most?
Come on, let's be honest. Dungeons and Dragons, obviously. I mean, Five Eyes, obviously, will see it and will enjoy it. If it's anything like The Gentleman, we're in for a great fun time. If it's anything like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., similar. But Dungeons and Dragons is just such an interesting prospect. How will they tackle it? Will it be funny? Will it be family friendly? All these sorts of things. Who will Hugh be playing, and how will he be playing the role? It's really, really exciting. I'm cautiously optimistic.
I'm really optimistic about it. I think this could be big.
I really hope so. I really hope so. I really, really hope so. I think if they do it right, it could just hit that mark and just kick Dungeons and Dragons properly into the stratosphere, get that right into the public eye again, but also get Hugh back, get that franchise going. Oh, that could be so exciting. Oh my God, I just thought figurines. There will definitely be Hugh Grant figurines.
You can order a life-size one, Diggs.
Oh my word, that's actually too exciting. Oh God, oh Jesus. Okay, well, I might have to go and lie down. We might have to end this podcast because the thought of that is just incredible. Oscar, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem, Diggs. It's a pleasure. And the countdown begins.
Indeed, the countdown begins. Stop the count. Shut up, Donald. Start the count. The countdown starts. It starts today. We're very, very excited. Right, we will see you guys very soon for another film review to see whether we're taking Hugh for granted. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Bye.
This is the end of Hugh's News. We hope you feel very Hugh's News about Hugh Grant. Hugh's News. And everything is very Hugh's News. And now it's time to say goodbye. Goodbye.
Hugh's News is a Taking Hugh for Granted production and is produced, edited and presented by Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore Gray. The producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. Instead, by creating this podcast, Oscar and Diggory hope to celebrate Hugh's illustrious career, reliving his old classics and shedding light on some of his hidden gems. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.